Church, open your Bibles. We are going to be in Exodus chapter 20, in the passage that we have been in all summer long. We have been in the 10 Commandments, and we continue today. We are actually in commandment number 9 today. And you know, I can't let you go for another week without making sure that you're memorizing the Bible, or the 10 Commandments rather, with me. And so go ahead. I need both hands up. Full. This is full. If I get you to do something with your body, chances are it's going to make its way to your mind. So hands are up, and here we go. We're going to put up the number 1 right now, and you are to have one God, no other gods before God. You're going to put up the other finger like this, and one finger is bowing down to the other, and that's because this one is an idol, and you are not to have any idols before God, and you're not to bow down to any idols. Number 3, you're going to put up a hand. I don't see all hands up. I'm calling people out right now. I'm calling people out. Hands, here's number 3. And the 3 creates a W. And you'll notice that that's because that stands for words. And you are not to use the Lord's name in vain. So again, all of those are all dealing with the way that we view God. Number 4 is going to have 2 fingers up like this, and you're going to create a little teepee, as it were, a little spot that's got a tent, and you are to honor the Sabbath. So you are to keep the Sabbath. And again, that's also kind of leaning towards the way that we treat and honor God. Then we're going to move towards the commandments that all now deal not in a horizontal way, but in a vertical way, starting off with number 5. 5 is up like this. It turns into a salute, and we are to honor our father and our mother. 6, one of our faves. Come on, you're always going to know that one. You got the 3 in each hand. You got the 6-shooter. You are not to murder. Number 7. Number 7 is one where you create a little platform that ends up being a wedding cake, and you have a person that walks across the top of it, because this one deals with marriage and our commitment of marriage. You are not to commit adultery. It was 2 weeks ago, and I'm kind of still feeling the heat of that one. That was a tense one. I realize that, and I'm still resonating myself on just the importance of that one for our lives. Last week we had number 8. You create a little wallet here with 4 fingers. You have another 4 fingers where you're taking the money out of the wallet. You are not to steal. Today, number 9, going to put up a hand like this. It's actually got 4 fingers on it because, this one's on the Bible, and then this one's up with 5 fingers like this, so there's 9. And you are not to bear false witness. We're obviously somewhat of in a court setting as you're taking that oath, not to bear false witness. And then number 10, the one we're going to have next weekend, you put up 10 fingers like this. You create your little spy glasses, your binoculars, and you are not to covet all the things that we see that we want that somebody else has. All right, we just made our way through the 10 Commandments. That's not hard. If you can just get some of those hand motions down, it helps connect that into your memorization of the 10 Commandments. Today, we are dealing with Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. Here it is, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. I want you to raise your hand right now. Have you ever served on a jury? Raise your hand if you served on a jury. More than I imagined. That's maybe 15, 20 of us today that have served on a jury. I like that. Thank you for your service to our community, maybe our nation even, if you're on a federal jury. I need to know, raise your hand, I'm not expecting many, but have you served as a witness? Has anybody served as a witness in court? Here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, more than I thought on that too. So we're just a serving group. I just really like that. Way to go. When we start talking about bearing false witness, you might think, well, this is just in a courtroom setting, and most of us haven't served on a jury. Most of us haven't served as a witness. And so you might say, well, this passage practically has nothing to say to me. I mean, it's just got this little narrow aspect of it. So this one's like one of the 10 Commandments that practically doesn't even touch me. Not so fast. Like so many others of the 10 Commandments, shall we say they've got little nuance to them. They've got strands to them. They go in other directions. And they go in other directions because the Bible has other things to say about that commandment in other spots of the Bible. And so we are going to learn about some of those other connection points today that are beyond the courtroom. And I want to make sure you understand how this ninth commandment affects your life, the places where it goes to affect your life. I do want to start today in the courtroom because that's where I think the setting of the Ten Commandments, this ninth commandment, is in the courtroom. That's its original sense. And you need to know something about an ancient courtroom. An ancient courtroom did not have some of the things that a modern courtroom has, or some ways that we might put forth evidence. So back in the day, witnesses were very important because there was no DNA evidence, there was no wiretapping, there was no audio, there was no fingerprints. All of those things are very modern court expression. Back in the day, it was a witness. That's what we relied upon. People who saw what happened and came and said to the court, this is what we saw. And so, again, witnesses were very important, and it was a big deal if you came forward and you perjured. That's what it means to go to court and not tell the truth. You are perjuring. If you went and perjured somebody else in court, that was a very big deal. And there are passages about that in the Bible, but maybe none as important as Deuteronomy chapter 19. Let me show that to you and read that for you. It says, one witness is not enough to convict anyone accused of any crime or offense that may have been committed. So, first of all, they're saying witnesses are so important that we need two of them, especially for a capital offense. If somebody's accused of committing murder or maybe something in which they're going to have a long jail time, we're going to need two witnesses for that. One's not going to be enough. A matter must be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. If a malicious witness, and again, a malicious witness is somebody who comes forward and is not telling the truth. If a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse somebody of a crime, the two people involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priests and the judges who were in the office at that time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against a fellow Israelite, then do to the false witness as the witness intended to do to the other party. You must purge the evil from among you. And so again, this was the idea of we want there to be a level of fear anytime somebody's going to the court, because we want people to tell the truth, and we don't want people to go tell a false story about somebody who's their neighbor that's not really true. Anytime we are in the courtroom or anytime in life that we are using the tongue, it matters to God. That little piece of flesh, maybe like 4 ounces inside of your mouth, that has the power to do things way beyond its size. The Bible says, James, it says it has the power to actually set a forest on fire. We are in the process of learning how to use that for constructive purposes and not how to hurt others. And so what we do with our speech and our tongue matters to God. What we do with the way that we conduct ourselves in telling stories about others or telling things about others matters to God. And so today we are going to be looking at this idea of false witness and 3 areas that it extends to. So it's going to extend to these other areas, and we're going to look at those 3 areas. 3 aspects of holding our tongues so that we don't hurt others with our words. Again, it starts in the courtroom, but it's going to extend to all aspects of life. The first area that's a serious one is slander. So we are not to slander other individuals. That's number 1. Slander is this. It is making false verbal statements that damage somebody else's reputation or character. So anytime you are slandering somebody, you're making statements about them that are not true, and you are somehow injuring their reputation. Notice, I did not know this until this week. I've used the word libel, but I didn't really know what it meant. Libel is making false written statements. So if you're slandering somebody, you're saying something about them. If you're libeling them, you're writing things about them, and that's the difference in modern law. But it all comes back to this idea of bearing false witness in commandment number 9. It's saying things that you know that are not true in order to hurt somebody or malign them in some way. And you need to know this. The heroes of the faith, almost all of them were slandered in some way. So the heroes of the faith, the people that we aspire to be like, have been slandered in their lives. Here's a list here. John the Baptist. It says in Matthew 11, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they said he has a demon." So he lived this austere life. He was off in the wilderness. He lived a little different kind of life. And everybody said, "Oh man, this guy's so weird. He must have a demon." Follow along. Jesus is in the next sentence of that passage, Matthew 11. "The Son of Man," referring to Jesus, "came eating and drinking." So unlike John the Baptist, he's the guy that's with everybody and he's partying up with them. And it says, "And they said, here he is, a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners." The last half of that is true. He is a friend of sinners. The first part of that is not true. He is not a glutton and he is not a drunkard. Neither of those ever was true about Jesus, but that was slandered about him. All the way down here we are with Paul. Paul says this. He writes, "Why not say, as some slanderously claim, that we say, let us do evil that good may result." And so again, Paul is saying, I'm out there preaching a gospel of grace. It's a gospel you don't earn favor with God. God gives that to you as a gift. And so some are twisting that on its head and say, well, if that's really the gospel, let's go out and sin a bunch because we want to make God look really good. And Paul says, no, you've just completely misunderstood what grace is. It's not about that. And so he's slandered in that way about what he is actually saying and what the gospel he is really claiming really is. If we are like the people that we emulate, again, we are like those individuals that are in the scriptures that lead noble lives, they get slandered, chances are good so will we. And you know, you can't control that. There's going to be individuals at times that are going to do that. You at that point have to say, God, I am relying upon my character with you, and that's going to be enough. The rest is kind of going to sort itself out. But this is what God is saying. I don't want you to be on the giving side of the slander. I don't want you to be the one that is slandering other individuals. That's wrong in my eyes, and I want you to stay away from that. If we slander other individuals, what does that really mean? How do we know if it is slander? Well, in the modern court sense or in the modern law sense, it's defamatory or it's injurious if these three conditions or any of these conditions are met. It's defamatory or it's slander if there are damages to the reputation of the person that you're talking about. It leads the person to be subject to contempt, hatred, or ridicule, or it causes the person to be shunned or avoided, like, for instance, fired or not hired. Any of those conditions are true, then it is something that you've said that is defamatory. And again, it can't, not necessarily a true statement, but it's an untrue statement about them that has some sort of consequence in that way. God is down on this. God says this is serious business. Proverbs chapter 10 says it this way: whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. And he's saying, I don't want you to be foolish people that are, again, doing things that are slandering the name of other individuals that are made in my image. Earl Wiggins had been feuding with his neighbor, Bob Hutchins, for 15 years over the boundary line on their property that was 3 inches wide. Earl was taken to court, small claims court, by Bob, and he came in loaded for bear. He was ready. He was going to give ironclad testimony about his neighbor. Your Honor, he said as he stood up against the judge's orders, Bob Hutchins is a menace to society. He plays music too loud. His dog does its business in my flowers. And worst of all, he paused for effect, he puts pineapple on his pizza. The judge blinked. Mr. Wiggins, we're here about the property line dispute. Furthermore, Earl claimed, warming up, he owns not one but 3 sparkly Christmas sweaters with lights on them. The man clearly has no respect for community standards of decency. Bob's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. My client's holiday fashion choices are irrelevant. He could not finish the sentence because Earl continued on, and he pointed with an accusatory finger. I once saw him put ketchup on a perfectly good steak. The courtroom fell silent. The judge rubbed his temples. Mr. Wiggins, while Mr. Hutchins' culinary choices may be questionable, They don't affect your property line dispute. Earl sighed defiantly and said, "But, Your Honor, surely a man who commits such crimes against pizza and beef can't be trusted with a tape measure." In the end, Earl lost the claim against Bob. But perhaps he won in the end because he was approached later by Bob after the courtroom time, and he said, "Hey, I want to make this right, and just so you know for the record, I have moved to ranch dressing on my pizza instead of pineapple." And that seemed to be somewhat conciliatory and a move towards the idea of some neighborly getting along. It matters what you say, and maybe that's a fun story, but we could all know a lot of other fun stories that aren't so fun. Because anytime you are saying things that are untrue about somebody, it is injuring their character, and God treats that very sternly. The next word in our list is, to understand the commandment number 9, is lying. We are not to lie. And so we might ask the question, what is the difference between slander and lying? Is there a difference between those two? There is a difference between those two. We just learned that slander deals with purposely trying to injure the other party. Lying is slightly different. Lying is saying things that are untrue for the purpose of deceiving. So deceit is what is really at the heart of lying. It's saying untruths or half-truths. It's doing that in order to make ourselves look good or gain some sort of advantage. Denise and I still remember this story, true story. There's a little young lad that came to our house with some of our friends of our kids. And we were talking with him this day, and, he was a very talkative young man. We were just chatting about all kinds of things. And he, without just kind of blinking, said, on vacation I was bit by a shark. And we're like, bit by a shark? Tell us more about that. And, maybe we could see the bite marks. Where did he bite you? And suddenly the kind of story kind of began to trail off. And, it's not like you're going to press a 9-year-old, if you know what I mean. But it was very evident. It's like, I don't think he's telling us the truth. For whatever reason, he thinks it'd be pretty cool to be bit by a shark. And he's kind of spinning a wise one here. The question is, why do we lie? Why do we say things that are not true? Why is that so easy to just kind of like spread right out of our mouths and out of our lives? Well, it's a mechanism oftentimes where we want to look more respectable, or we want to look more smart, or more capable, or perhaps we want to get something that we want. And so we are willing to deceive or lie in order to be able to get what it is we really want. Let me give you an example. You're invited to a meeting. You really don't want to go to that meeting. And so rather than say, "I'm sorry, I can't come," you're like, "Well, let's just soften the blow here a little bit." It's like, "You know what? I'm not feeling well. I can't make it. I've got another meeting at that time, so I can't come. Oh, I've got an appointment to wash the cat." I mean, whatever the thing is that you say, you're not really telling the truth about that, because what is it that you really want? You really want not to go to that meeting. And so again, you're willing to cover up with these other things in order to be able to get what it is you really want. God has harsh words for, again, individuals that are lying. Proverbs chapter 12 says it this way: "The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy." He wants trustworthy people. And we have to understand, where is it that lying actually comes from? Satan is the one who has the first lie in the Bible. And this is the first lie in the Bible right here. You will not, he's talking to Eve right now, and he says, "Hey, let's take a bite of the fruit here." And he says, she says, "Well, no, God said if we do that, we'll die." And he says, "Certainly you won't die." The serpent said to the woman, "For God knows that when you eat from your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God." I mean, that is the first lie of the Bible, is that there's not just a God that's outside of you. You're God. And if you can just do the things that God does, then you're God in the way that you now lead life. And so he deceives Eve and then Adam, and they take of the fruit in order to, again, become like God. Abraham is the one that the Jews said, "You know what? This is our father. This is the guy that we descend from. This is the guy that is our ancestor of faith. He's the father of our faith, and so he's the guy we anchor to." And Jesus says, no, you religious leaders that have a lot of contempt for me right now, that's not really who your Father is. And so let me tell you who your Father is. If you think Jesus is just tame, listen to this. Jesus says, you are of your father, the devil. So you're not just from Abraham, you're from the devil. And your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Whoa! I mean, you going to have Jesus talking to you like that? I mean, he's very serious about that. And again, what he's saying is there's no truth in the devil. There's no truth in Satan. He always is just breathing out lies. And if we take on the role of lying, then we are individuals that are being like the father of lies. We're being like the devil. And he says, I don't want you to be people like that. I want you to be people of truthfulness. Erwin Lutzer is the pastor of Moody Church, has been for many, many years. And he tells the story of growing up. He grew up in the Midwest. He tells the story of growing up in the Midwest when he was about 10 years old. And his father came to him. They lived on a farm. And his father said, it is now your responsibility to care for the chickens. And I want you to feed the chickens every night at 5 o'clock. He says, okay, I can do that. And so, the first day rolls around. And he says, did you feed the chickens? And he says, yes, I did. And he said, the truth was I had forgotten and I did not feed the chickens, but I decided I would lie. And so, his dad believed him, and he said, I went out about 15 minutes later to feed the chickens like I had remembered all along, and I thought to myself, you know what? That was really easy. And he said, there's lots of times when we talk about guilt that you feel when you do something wrong, when you sin or you lie. He said, I felt no guilt that summer. 10 years old, I was like, this is the way to live life. This is awesome. I can just say whatever I want and then go do it whenever I want. Nobody's hurt. The chickens are still fed. This is going to be fine. And so he says, I made the covenant that I was going to live life that summer that way. So about a week later, my dad asks, did you feed the chickens? And he said, it just slipped out so easy. I said, yes, I did. And he said, I clearly had not. And so he said, I waited for a little while. And he said, I didn't want to look like, I was just jumping out there to go do it. He said, I waited about 10 or 15 minutes. Then I went out. I got the feed, and I was feeding the chickens. And you can imagine who walked up. Dad walked up. And he says, I was caught red-handed. I had just lied, and Dad now shows up. He said, that day, my father introduced me to the Board of Education. It's so easy to have lies just come out, almost for no purpose at times. And it's just so easy to have that be a part of our normal and typical conversation. And it's something, again, that takes extra energy. So I'm really saying, boy, don't spend the extra energy, because you gotta keep all the lies straight, and you got to keep them all in order. You got to remember what you told who when. And he says, it's just easier, just be truthful. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no, as Jesus would tell us. As the saying goes, oh, what a tangled web we weave when we purpose to deceive. It's like all of that spider web that's created, and it's so difficult to navigate because you got to remember all the dimensions of it. All right, I have one more word for you today. We've started with slander. We've moved to lying. And I want to go to the third word that talks about this 9th commandment and the use of our speech. The final word is gossip. And I've given those to you today in order of their severity. So slander is purposely trying to hurt somebody. Lying, attempting to deceive. Gossip, well, it still has the potential to be very harmful, but it may not be as severe at times as those other two. What is gossip? Here's the definition I have for us today. It's passing along a rumor or report that has not or cannot be substantiated. So it's giving a tidbit or a morsel of information. It's telling something about somebody else that you think might be true, or maybe it's not true, but we're going to tell it anyway because it's just so juicy. I found a picture this week that looks or depicts the idea of this gossip. Here it is. Isn't that just awesome? I mean, it's just like that. That's just the picture of the moment in which the tidbit of information is passed from one to the other, and it's just so juicy. Leave that up for a minute, Because here's what a couple of authors say. Joseph Conrad, gossip is what no one claims to like, but everybody enjoys. Isn't that the truth right there? This is George Bernard Shaw. The things most people want to know about are usually none of their own business. So, it really has nothing to do with you, but you're passing along that information. Gossip is hearsay. It's information about somebody else that we pass along, oftentimes because we just want to be a part of the in-group. Well, the in-group knows this, and so I want to be a part of the in-group. As a test, I usually ask myself, would I say this if this person was standing right here, right now? Would I tell another person or a group of people about this if the person was standing here? Here's an example. Would I say, Joe just got a speeding ticket today, if Joe was standing right here? Would I tell other people that? If right here next to me is Mary's having marital struggles, would I say that? Would I say, Pete thinks his feet stink? I mean, would I say that with Pete standing right here? It's a good question to ask ourselves. If somebody was right there, would I say that about them, or would I keep my mouth shut? As the saying goes, those who gossip with you will ultimately gossip about you. So that's a very good indicator. If somebody's gossiping with you, chances are down the road they're going to gossip about you. And in general, individuals that are pretty happy with their own lives don't usually have to talk about somebody else's lives. And usually individuals that are happy with their own lives have this sense of saying, you know what, I'm going to give others the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to treat others with respect, and I'm going to treat others as if I'm not going to believe that unless there's evidence really to support that. Some of us today have used the acronym THINK, and it's a mnemonic. Anytime we hear a piece of juicy information, we ask ourselves the question using the mnemonic THINK. And some of you have seen this before, but here it is. Before you pass that information along, you ask yourself, is it true? And so is the information true, and do I know it's true beyond a shadow of a doubt? H, is it helpful? If I pass this along, is this helping the person that I'm sharing about, or is it helping the individual that's learning about this? I, is it inspiring? By inspiring, they mean, is this good or instrumental for the whole community? Is this something that uplifts and benefits everybody? N, is it necessary? And K, is it kind? And you can pass that little bit of information that you're receiving through that little grid and say, is that something that is wise for me to pass on right now? Or is it something that's like, it's really none of my business. It's really not helpful. And so I'm going to sit on that, and I'm not going to say something that I maybe could. In today's day and age, it's easy to be sunk in trial by Twitter. And I realize it's now called X, but trial by Twitter, you get what I mean by that. All kinds of things are constantly going across Twitter that are unsubstantiated. There are things about other individuals or circumstances that are not vetted in any way, but they just kind of are put out there. Facebook could be that spot. Even text messaging could be that spot. But there's this idea that something is true if it's merely put out there online, and it gains a life of its own. And many times, those kinds of rumors can have dire consequences. I want to take you back to the Olympics, 1996. They were held in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the things that makes the Olympics stand apart is there was a bomb threat at that Olympics. And there was a security guard that found the bomb in a backpack, and I've got his picture here right now. It's Richard Jewell. There he is. And Richard Jewell came and told the authorities. They went and defused the bomb. The Olympics went on, and Richard Jewell was a hero. He was being interviewed by all the news outlets, and he was on the Today Show, and man, how did you do this, and how did you find this? And so, he's a hero. Well, just a few days later, the FBI reports that he is now a man who is under investigation for potentially having planted that bomb. And here's the cover of the newspaper. FBI suspects hero guard may have planted the bomb. And so you can imagine what happened now with everybody just putting out information and images. So the FBI descends upon his home while all the media is there also at his home. And this is a picture of his car that's being taken away for forensic evidence. And so it's being towed away. And you can imagine what happens with Richard Jewell. Richard Jewell, in the mind of the nation, is guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. There's no other way out of this. It takes 88 days until the FBI comes out and says he's clear. He is not guilty. He didn't do any of this. 88 days is a lot of time for a reputation and for character to be utterly destroyed. And that's what happened with Richard Jewell. Gossip. Unsubstantiated rumors about Richard Jewell destroyed his life and destroyed his reputation. Let's bring this in for a landing. The first thing we need to do today is to understand that our tongues are dangerous. If they are left unchecked, they can slander, they can lie, they can gossip. And so you and I need help. Because if we were left to our own devices, we did not have the Holy Spirit guiding us, we would be infectious with the way that we use our tongues. Next, we may need to repair something that's broken. Maybe you've said something about somebody else that's been injurious to them, hurtful to them. It's time for you to go to them, acknowledge that, and use 3 words that are very, very important. I am sorry. In fact, maybe you're even going to ask them for forgiveness, which would be a good thing. In order for us to excel as a church, we need to guard our tongues. And I wish to commend you, CCF, because for many years you have done this very well. Private information has been kept private. And for the most part, we have been a church that I think has excelled in that area. And that's care for people. Thank you for doing that. But we need to be constantly vigilant and constantly moving towards this idea of controlling our tongues and having a level of self-control. Let me close with this. Fighter pilots, in order to fly modern machines of war, they have to have a lot of training. And when the moment comes in which they are at that spot of there's a threat, there's another plane on the horizon, there are missiles that have been fired, they've been caught on radar, they have to act instantaneously in doing that. Now again, you might say that their instinct is what's got to take over, but their instinct had to be trained over a lot of years. And so they have had classes, they've had flight simulations, and then they've been in the cockpit of planes for thousands of hours in order to come to the spot where they don't even really have to think about it. Muscle memory takes over. Their memory just takes over, and here they are able to act instantaneously because of all that training that's been put into them, and so now they're able to literally turn on a dime. Our tongues are the same way. They're a muscle that you want it to arrive at the spot in which you're just instinctively doing what's right. But it matters all of the training and the thought that goes into it back here. And so I would argue all of us are still back here doing the things that are right in order to build the habits in which we're instinctual ultimately someday. And we are relying upon God to rebuild us and build us back here to do the right things. Maybe it's a little clunky at first, but we're doing that in order to come to the spot where our speech is very fluid in being honoring to God and honoring to other people. Church, this is what I want you to hear today. May God be glorified through our speech. He deserves that. Father, thank you again for the 10 Commandments that are a constant light to us on your character, who you are, what matters to you, and the way that we say truth or falsehood matters to you about each other. And so we are asking, Lord, would you come control the tongues of the church today? We want to be instruments of righteousness, not instruments of darkness. And so help us towards that endeavor. We pray this in Christ's name. And all God's people said, amen.